Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tomek Pabiański. I'm a PwC tax partner based in Warsaw, Poland. I also serve as the PwC CEE Indirect Tax Network leader. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this webinar, which will be dedicated to customs and international trade. Why we picked this particular topic? Being always interesting, we believe that in months to come, it will be moving towards the top of the agenda of the business organizations dealing with international supply of goods. And this belief is justified also in the light of the ever-growing complexity of the supply chains internationally, as well as the visible global macroeconomic and geopolitical trends. PwC CEE network groups more than 20 countries and more than 250 specialists dedicated to indirect taxes, including customs. You will have the opportunity to meet and to listen to a few of them in a minute. Looking at the agenda, we prepared, if I can have the next slide, we prepared a variety of topics for you. We'll be updating you on what's new is coming in the very core of the customs systems, namely tariff and goods origination. We'll be covering an interesting topic based on the pending European court proceedings, where customs meet tax regulations related to transfer pricing. You will hear about the new institutions that may potentially simplify your imports. And also we'll cover an update from the Ukraine regarding the local customs practice. We planned a bit longer than usually for this webinar, but we believe that you will find the time spent with us useful, interesting, and even inspiring. And if this will be the case, we, as the PwC CEE Indirect Tax Network, are happy to commit ourselves to continue with the similar events in the months to come. And now, without further ado, I'm proudly handing to the first presenter.
Thank you, Tomasz, for the introduction. And I have an honor to start with my presentation today. Here it is. Okay, so I am Monika Bielskienė. I am from Lithuania. I am attorney at law and also a senior manager at PwC Lithuania. I focus mainly on customs and VAT, and I'm also a member of a technical committee on customs valuation in the International Chamber of Commerce, and part of my presentation will be based on this experience with ICC. So let's start with a little bit of statistics. And it is that intercompany transactions constitute 60% of the international trade volume. So we have a lot of transactions between the related parties. And the reason for it is that those huge amount of those multinational enterprises who have a lot of transactions between each other. It's you see services, it is finance, it's intellectual property, but for customs purposes, we are mostly interested in this part where goods are moving, and if they cross the international border, then the customs rules comes into the scene. And as this is also a related party transactions, actually to the same movement of goods, two sets of rules apply. Both transfer pricing rules, they are set mostly by OECD, but also transposed to the national law. I will talk about it a little bit later, and also all the customs rules. And to see how, and as we have two sets of rules to the same transaction, it sometimes becomes an issue. And I will show you one example how it can come into real life. So let's imagine I am a Lithuanian citizen, and I have a company in Lithuania who produces lasers. And I come up with a brilliant idea that I want to make them better. I want to have some technology, some new development from the international experience. And I find out that there are a lot of talented people in South Korea. So that's why I incorporate a company there, and they manufacture some high-tech chips in there. And I can buy those chips from my Korean company and import them into Lithuania and put them into my lasers. So I have two companies, both are mine. One is manufacturing lasers, one is manufacturing chips, and I have a related party transaction. So the goods are moving across the EU border, so I have an import transaction. And regarding the sale, as these both are my companies, I do not have any like real negotiations. I can set whatever price really I like. So I could sell it for 1,000. I could sell it for 10,000. I could sell it for 5. So it's like seems from at the first glance that it's my own decision, but actually it's not. And this is because of the transfer pricing framework. The transfer pricing, if I put it in a very simple words, is just ensuring that profit will be taxed at a correct country. So that's why if I had the transaction between the companies in a different countries, transfer pricing rules ensure that the correct amount of profit is registered in the correct country, and all the countries get the fair share of what their companies did. So actually, when I said that I can set whatever price I like, 1,000 or 10,000 or 5,000, actually transfer pricing rules set by OSD and the national ones. So they just oblige me to make difficult or less difficult calculations and come up with a price range which would be in line with the so-called arm's length principle. If I put it in a simple words, also it means that I have to prove that the same price would be applied if I sold the goods to the unrelated party. So it's like a more or less market transaction. So in my example, let's say that I sold the goods for 5,000 actually, but when I made that transfer pricing exercise, when I made the calculations, when I made the functional analysis and all the other calculations required by the transfer pricing methodology, I came up with a conclusion that actually my real price should have been lower. That means that I bought for 5,000, but actually my real price should be more like 4,000 euros. So to be compliant with the transfer pricing regulations, I issue a credit note, reducing my price by 1,000 euros from 5,000 to 4,000 euros. So now I am compliant with the transfer pricing regulations, but on the other hand, I also had the customs rules. So I make these adjustments, and my first question is, do I have to inform customs authorities about that? I imported goods and I put in the declaration the price of 5,000 euros. And now after the correction, the actual price is 4,000 euros. Do I have to inform customs authorities? So there is no simple answer to that. In Lithuania, you do have to inform it, especially if you, because of the adjustment, you have to pay more customs duties. In my example, I had to pay less. So it's not that interesting for the customs authorities. But if I would have to pay more, then in most countries, I have to inform customs authorities. Do I have to amend customs declaration? That's another question. And we have the ECJ practice in the Hamamatsu case, and also my colleagues will present another practice later. The ECJ practice says that you don't have to, but many customs authorities around the world, they say if you had to pay, if because of that adjustment you have to pay more customs duties, then yes, you have to amend. But if you have a right to like a refund, or if you had to pay less duties, then it's okay. You don't have this obligation. what are the legal consequences of the adjustment? So that is especially interesting in the case when you have to pay more customs duties. So because you try to be compliant with the transfer pricing obligation, you just somehow automatically were in compliance with the customs rules. So do you have penalties because of that? So in most of the cases, if you self-report, then you have no penalties, but perhaps you will have late in payment interest. And if customs authorities find out that, so that might be an issue. What documents should be provided? So you will have the credit note, you will have the most probably transfer pricing documentation according to which the adjustment was made. Usually customs authorities does not have that competence to read transfer pricing documentation, so that's where the tax authorities might become involved. Can I refund the overpaid customs duties? So as a main rule, no, but there are some exceptions in the world. And for example, Lithuania is one of the nice examples where you theoretically could refund the overpaid customs duties. How do I control the process in the future? If I have that transfer pricing adjustments from year to year, do I have to do that amendment of the customs declaration each year? When do I inform customs? How do I make the process smooth? So that's something that I have to set up in my company. And I think the most important question is, does my customs compliant expert know about the transfer pricing adjustment? Because those adjustments are usually in the level of CFO and financial department of the company, and they do not even think that it has something to do with the customs. So actually that's where the problem is, the lack of communication and lack of awareness that this might be an issue. So as I said, penalties are not implied in most cases if you self-report, but if you don't know about the issue, that is an issue already. So that's something to think about. And now to continue, as I said, some survey of the ICC to give you a context how these rules, how these transfer pricing and customs valuation rules, how they interact and how these issues are solved around the world. So the ICC, International Chamber of Commerce, they performed a survey, and it covered 48 countries. You see, it's from EMEA zone, APAC zone, from America, so it's quite comprehensive. And there were like a lot of points which were covered by the survey. So, for example, one is about do customs accept transfer pricing documentation? For example, this documentation says that the price is set by you. For example, my 5,000 euros in my example is okay. It's in the price range, so I do not have to make anything. So does this prove for customs purposes that my relationship with my supplier did not have influenced the price? So as we see, officially, nobody accepts that, but informally, it's like the vast majority of countries accept the transfer pricing documentation. Now, about the recognition of retrospective compensating adjustments according to the transfer pricing documentation. So we see it's a huge disparity. Some countries do accept it officially, some informally, and some do not accept it at all. Now, if we move to the amendment of the customs declaration, you see that the position of the customs authority depends if you want to pay more duty or if you want to refund some. So, as you see, officially, nobody reacts, but unofficially, if you want to pay more, then they will take it. And but if you want a refund, the vast majority, 44 of 48 countries will not give you a refund. Now, if we have another question is allocation method. Do I have, usually we have a huge amount of import going through the year, and we have transfer pricing adjustment, just one for the whole year. So do you have to go line by line and to put different tariffs, or can you make some average calculation? So you see, again, officially, no clarity, but if you want to pay more, then it's okay. If you want to refund, then no. Now, another is do you have to amend each customs declaration, or can you just amend one? just for the simplicity purposes, you just want to be compliant. So again, we see that in the vast majority of countries, it is not accepted. So we have to do a huge amount of customs declarations amendments. And also about the penalties. So if you self-report, most probably you will not receive a penalty, but even in 8 countries, even if you self-report and you are like not guilty of this, you just try to be compliant with the transfer pricing requirements, you still get a penalty for customs purpose. So just to resume, to summarize the findings of the survey, so it is the legal environment remains non-harmonized, it is complex, and it's like officially there are in most cases no rules, and so in some countries like in the USA or in the South Korea, they have some already rules set up and some clarity, but actually in the EU and also in other countries there are 2 main instruments which could be used in dealing with those transfer pricing adjustments in some comprehensive and certain manner, so it will be a controlled process. So it's provisional value declarations. So in essence, in the EU, it would mean submitting an open declaration, a so-called open declaration, and then submit the additional data and close the declaration within the period of 2 years when you already had a transfer pricing adjustment and an advance ruling. So in the EU, we had the regulation already adopted, but it will come into force only in 2027. So maybe the importers will have some certainty and some possibility to have officially accepted rules or processes, but for now it is not still the case. So there is much unclarity in this field. So thank you very much. And as this is a very complex subject, we need 3 people to cover it. So I want to just ask my colleagues from Bulgaria, Valentin and Vladislav, to continue on this topic.
Hello, I'm Vladislav. I hope you can hear me. So now I'm moving to the next slides, taking over for Monica. Thank you, Monica, for introducing the topic so far. We would like to put some additional emphasis on the valuation and the transfer pricing impact on customs import activities. Basically, many multinational companies are involved in importing goods where the value of the goods is adjusted after a certain period. Basically, this is always a question, as Monica said, whether the value of import should be adjusted afterwards, after sometimes quite a long period after the import was actually done. There was such a discussion in Germany in the past, and this brought the ECJ case Hamamatsu, where the court concluded that actually it is not allowed to apply the agreed transaction value for customs valuation purposes in cases where the value consists of initially invoiced amount and a subsequent transfer pricing adjustment that is done after the end of the accounting period. So many companies concluded that this would mean that transfer pricing adjustments do not impact the customs value at all. However, we have seen that this case can have a different reading, both from the customs authorities or for customs experts. And it may also be interpreted like that where there are price adjustments expected after the import, it can be seen that we are in a situation where the customs valuation cannot be determined at the date of import, and therefore the importer and the customs authorities should use another method and not the transaction value method. Therefore, this is a kind of uncertainty to all companies that have adjustments to the price after the import has taken place. So these adjustments could be triggered from transfer pricing adjustments, but they could be triggered also from various other events. For example, in the contracts, even between non-related parties, there could be some stock exchange adjustments. There could be some royalties payable at the end of the period based on the volume of the goods transferred. So there are different situations where post-import adjustments could be required. So it is important to know what value shall be used upon import so that the companies do not enter into disputes with the customs authorities and do not suffer penalties and default interest. So this brings us to the new case that was brought by Lithuania to the European Court of Justice. So this is the case C782 from the year of 2023. And the court is asked to comment whether it is possible to apply the transaction value method of customs valuation in a situation where the final price is not known at the time of accepting the customs declaration. So this means that at the date of import, the valuation and the customs value, the final price is not quite clear. So it is subject to some adjustments. And in the specific case, we will briefly run through the facts just for you to be aware of what is going on there. So basically, it concerns a company that purchased some quantities of fuel. It was diesel and jet fuel from suppliers. Many of you may know that transactions of fuel are subject to adjustments due to the different measurements of volume after receiving the goods and some other circumstances. So there, the contract, it was between non-related parties. The contract was suggesting such adjustments to be done after the import. And the importing company imported the goods and it declared the provisional price that was initially invoiced with a pro forma to be the customs valuation. However, in the customs declaration, they did not report that this is the transaction value method used to determine the customs value. So it's not the invoiced amount, but they reported that they use the so-called fallback method based on the Union Customs Code. And it is a method which says that is using a reasonable means consistent with the principle of GATT and the Union Customs Code. So this is a kind of, in simple words, some kind of reasonable valuation based on other means. So what happens next is that after the import provisional price was adjusted, there were some cases where the price was adjusted down, some cases where the price was adjusted up. And the company that imported the goods, they tried to adjust the customs value for the cases where the price had to be adjusted down so that they reduced their import duties, but they did not adjust for the cases where the price was adjusted up. So the customs authorities, on the other hand, said that they have to include the cases where the value is adjusted up, and this triggered a dispute. And the dispute went to the court, and some questions were asked to the European Court of Justice, saying that should the transaction value method be applied when the final price is not known at the date of import? So basically, the question here is, should the invoice value be used at all if it is not clear how much will be the final price? So this is in simple terms. And this is also the case of transfer pricing adjustments, year-end royalties, and so on. So this is a very key question to be addressed. And then the next question asked to the European Court of Justice is it necessary for the declarant to request the customs authorities to adjust the customs value if the fallback method was used in the import declaration? What does it mean? So in the customs declaration, in this case, the company importing the goods was saying that they use another method, not the transaction price. So they don't use the invoice price formally. They use, they say, a method of other reasonable measurements. So then the question comes, is it necessary then, if reasonable valuation was done, is it necessary to adjust for some subsequent price adjustments? So we don't know what the court will answer, but this triggers some important issues to consider. And one of them is if we are in situations where the price is adjusted after the import, should we use the invoice value as a method of customs valuation at all? Because if we know that there will be changes to this value, then probably this is not the correct value to use. So we should see what the court will answer, but this may have significant impact on the way multinational companies operate on import, because from our practice, in many cases, we have seen that the easiest thing is to show an invoice to the customs authorities and say, this is the value. However, if this value is going to be changed, you have two options: to make adjustments afterwards, but this will probably trigger penalties and some other negative issues, or to use another method, which is secondary method of some kind of valuation, which is, however, more difficult to justify. And of course, if we decide to use a secondary method from the beginning, then if there is a price adjustment afterwards, do we need to take into account that price adjustment? We will see. So what we want to raise attention here is that from this case, there could be significant impact on the way multinational companies operate, and this may require, depending on the answer of the case, many companies to re-examine their value chain and the way they report the imports. Let's hope that the court will bring a reasonable answer and will allow the business to operate in a more predictable way. We will be happy to inform you on the outcome of this. And if we have any questions, we are happy to answer. If not, then we would like to thank you for your attention, and we would like to hand over to the next presenters and the next topic.
Thank you very much. Yes, let's move to the next presentation. My name is Eva Polka-Perce, working as manager in the indirect tax team of PwC Hungary. During my work, I help solving customs and international trade compliance related issues. Furthermore, we help in green tax related questions as well. I surely know that there are people in our today's audience who is aware of the relevance of tariff classification, especially who had to face customs audits before. Still, we would like to draw your attention to the increasing relevance of the correct tariff classification in today's economic surrounding. As understanding well, the product portfolio can save, in a way, the competitiveness of the company. In order to get some insight in the topic, let's talk about the basic information. Customs tariff numbers are used to uniquely identify goods and international trade. The basis of the customs tariff numbers worldwide is the so-called harmonized system, which was elaborated by the World Customs Organization. The harmonized system is applied by more than 200 administrations worldwide. What is worth to remember regarding the harmonized system is that it determines just the first 6 digits of the customs tariff numbers. During import, so release for free circulation customs procedures, importers needs to declare 10-digit tariff code, which means that in order a third country seller to provide this relevant information about the correct customs tariff number, they need to get insight in the EU legislation, which can be problematic. Furthermore, we would like to reflect on the situation when importers believe that determining the customs tariff number is the task of the manufacturer and the exporter. However, we would like to highlight that the responsibility for the data correctness is on the importers, of course, and And even if somebody is working with a customs agent, the relevant information about the tariff classification many times do not appear in the everyday trade, as some specific product-specific information is not mentioned in the trade documentation. This way, determining the correct customs tariff number should be a separate matter, a separate process. In order to highlight the importance well, we listed here for you the measures in which the customs tariff numbers has high relevance. And of course, it is obvious that regarding customs duties, the customs tariff numbers are relevant, but we need to look at this from a trade compliance perspective, as customs duties are determining payable or duties to be paid, but even in case we are aware of the portfolio, we can earn customs duty saving as well through customs duty suspensions or preferential tariff quotas or preferential trade agreements. So it is important for the saving perspective as well. And on the list, you can see the international measures, the hot topic of today in the European Union. What we see that these new legislation requires relevant effort regarding the compliance. So it is important to know our portfolio in order to avoid unnecessary efforts made. Next to the international measures, we need to mention that there are several national legislation that is relevant in case of tariff classification. For example, in Hungary, we can mention the EKR, or until the end of this year, the relevance of environmental protection product fee is also to be mentioned, or even the so-called chips tax is scoping based on customs tariff numbers. To get some insight in the hot topics, let's see the carbon border adjustment mechanism and its relevance for today. The CBAM aims to prevent the carbon leakage by ensuring that the imported goods are subject to the same payment obligation as for the products produced in the European Union through the scope of the EU ETS system. And it supports the EU's climate objectives as well. The scope of the legislation is limited yet. Let's say this is the starter pack of the CBAM. The scope is on cement, iron and steel, aluminium, fertilizers, electricity, and hydrogen. But we still have to mention that the extension of the scope is expected, as even the regulation mentions that the extension with polymers is to be analyzed. What makes the CBAM important is that to be compliant with this legislation, a relevant effort has to be made, as importers must report actual emission data of the emissions released during the manufacturing of the imported products. The emission-specific information must be requested from the manufacturers, which is really complicated in its matter, because they need to understand the purpose of CBAM, the data elements to be shared, and even the calculation which was determined by the European Commission. The compliance and the effort made can harm the competitiveness of the economic operators. So this is why the very first thing to be checked about CBAM is whether the products are subject to this measure for sure or not, and the tool or the process to make is the product portfolio check from tariff classification perspective. So this can be a very good point to avoid any unnecessary effort of data collection. Let's highlight another measure which is relevant for today, the EU deforestation regulation. Similarly to the CBAM, there is a lot of data elements that has to be requested from the manufacturers in order to comply with the obligations of the EU deforestation regulation. The aim of this regulation is to avoid that on the EU market there are products which are affects the forest degradation. So all the aim is to have products on the EU market which is deforestation free. And this way, a lot of information has to be collected from the manufacturers to meet this obligation. It was a very good news formally or recently that the EU Commission decided to postpone the implementation of EUDR to 30 December 2025. So there is a time period for the economic operators to prepare. From tariff classification point of view, it is important that here not just the imported products, but as well the exported products and the product put on EU market has to be checked. So the whole product portfolio should be analyzed. And again, correct tariff classification can avoid the unnecessary efforts made for compliance work. So in case we are talking about a whole product portfolio check from tariff classification point of view, we need to talk about the instrument that help us ensuring the certainty of the customs tariff number determined. This is the legally binding decision, the binding tariff information, which can be requested from the customs authorities of the EU member states. What is important that it is EU-wide used decision. This means in case an economic operator requests this decision in Hungary, it can use it in France or in other EU member states as well. And the customs authorities must accept the correctness of the customs tariff number, and on the other hand, the importers must declare the number of the BTI on the customs declarations. When we are talking about portfolio check and tariff classification, we need to mention this aspect that binding tariff information normally should be requested from one product to another separately. This means that the products have to be under single BTIs. But in order to have some citing this question, we would like to highlight that one BTI can cover products with different material number in case the differences are irrelevant from tariff classification point of view. So this could help to cover more products in one single BTI in the future. So I hope that I could highlight the importance of tariff classification in today's economy, and I hope that we could help you with this insight that in today's economy we need to take care of the product portfolio in order to save the competitiveness. Thank you for your attention. And I give the floor now to the next presenter.
The next topic is mine. Hello, I'm Aleš Šerho from PwC Czech Republic, and I will today cover the topic of the military use and dual use goods. And I will explain what are these goods, why do we need any special rules about these goods, what are the rules and obligations that you should follow, what are the risks if you don't follow these rules, and what you should do to prevent any risk related to these goods. So what are the military use and dual use items? Maybe let me start explaining from the history, because the history of this topic started mainly around more than 20 years ago during the attacks in New York against the World Trade Center, where the Western governments and countries started being very sensitive about terrorism and wanted to prevent any support of potential terrorism or international aggression in general. And they realized that they first have to identify who is actually the enemy. And they started identifying the terrorist organizations, individuals, companies that support the aggression, or even countries that support the aggression. So they put together long lists of sanction lists where they listed who is actually the enemy. And they also had to define what is the support of the terrorism and aggression. And they also realized that it's not only the obvious selling weapons or explosives to these organizations and countries, but it's also other types of support, such as, for example, buying products from them. Because when you do, then you give them profit, which means you're giving them money which they can use to finance terrorism and aggression. And the other way of support is selling them also other goods that may not seem at the first look as military use goods, but are rather common civil goods, which, however, can be also used for any military purposes. So we have these two groups on this slide, and the governments in Western countries concluded, as a reaction to the terrorism and the international tension, let's say, concluded many international agreements how to prevent any support of terrorism. And as a reaction to that, the European Union published two main pieces of legislation. One is related to the military goods, and the other one is focused on the dual-use goods. So what are these two groups of goods? The military goods in the right column, for that we have the directive of the European Union, which is called Directive for Control of Defense-Related Products. This one is, let's say, easier or more obvious, because these goods which are seen as military goods are obviously those as weapons, cannons, tanks, or explosives, but it could be also other machines or tools, or heavy-duty things such as military trucks, for example, which can be used to mount cannons on the trucks and can be used for military purposes. So what is important to understand here, that the Directive for Control of Defense-Related Products contains a long list of products which are understood as military goods. And if you do trade or produce or export these types of products, which are on the list of this directive, then you need to get a license for trading with these goods. The license is issued by individual European countries, so you need to go to your local authority responsible for this and ask them to give you a license. What is their responsibility is to review all the international agreements and sanction lists, review your customer, for example, to make sure that he is not on the sanction list. And once they do the review, they grant you the license to export these types of goods, or they can also tell you that you are not allowed to export these goods, or you are not allowed to sell to certain customers or sell to certain territories, for example. We did have a practical case. We had a client which was a military from other European country. And here in Czech Republic, we have a producer of heavy-duty trucks. And the military from the other country ordered production of heavy-duty trucks from this Czech producer. And they wanted the trucks to be in army mascara colors. So the trucks looked very much like army trucks. And they were afraid that once the trucks are finished and are transported from Czech Republic to this other European country, there will be actually a huge convoy of 60 military-looking trucks that will be passing through the highways in Czech Republic or passing through the borders of Czech Republic. And they wanted to make sure that there will be no authority, no police or anything stopping them, telling them that they breached some sanctions. So we checked the local authorities and checked the case with them. And they confirmed to us that since the final destination of these military goods is the other European country, and the final customer is a NATO member, there is no license needed. But that was because the final destination was the other European country. If it was known at the moment of transporting the products to the other European country that the final destination is or could be some third country out of the EU, then the license would be needed. And then the other group of goods are the dual-use goods. Again, the piece of legislation here is the regulation for control of dual-use goods. And this regulation contains a long list of products that are considered as intended for common civil use, but also could be used for military purposes, for any international aggression or for terrorism. We have on the other slide the list which is in this legislation. You can see that this is groups of products, and each group is very much defined in very much detail, and sometimes it's not easy at all to understand what falls on the list or what doesn't. I noted for myself that there are things that even surprised myself because there is, for example, a lot of car components or aircraft components. But there are also some obvious things like electronics, microchips, electronic control units, gyroscopes, GPS locators, or software which can control the GPS locators, gyroscopes. There can be also some optics, communication devices, cameras, or, for example, detergents that you use in your wash machine, or fertilizers that you use in your garden. These are chemicals that can be used for production explosives. So these are also on the list of dual-use goods. So what you need to do is check the legislation, the European regulation, but not only that one. Also, many European countries implemented their own lists of dual-use goods. So you should check this legislation and check whether the products which are in your portfolio could be on the list or not. And you should divide the products into three groups. Those that are obviously not on the list, you don't have to do anything about these. The other groups are products which certainly are on the list of dual-use goods. You need to go to local authorities and ask for license for trading with these goods. And then you will probably end up with a group of items which you are not certain if they are on the list of dual-use goods. For this purpose, you should consult with your local authority. In Czech Republic, the responsible authority is the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and they have specialized department which should be responsible for all these international agreements for prevention of terrorism, all the international sanctions, because there is so many legislation about this. and it's really nearly impossible that common people would understand and have all the knowledge. So this Department of Ministry and Trade have the experienced people. They are really well educated, and based on our experience, they are also very kind and helpful. So if you are not sure if your product is on the list of dual use items, you should definitely consult with them, because it's their responsibility to check for you if there is any obligation or not, and if you do need the license or not. For this one, I also have practical experience. One of the biggest car producers in the Czech Republic wanted to transport some machines for car production out of the EU. And before they transported these machines, they first transported the machines to Poland for temporary storage. And they were not sure if these machines are on the list of dual-use goods. We checked for them. We also consulted with the local authorities. And the answer was that these machines are on the list of dual-use goods, because these machines are quite complicated machines and contain a lot of electronics, a lot of microprocessors, and also a lot of hydraulics. And for these reasons, these machines were on the list of dual-use items, and they even needed license for transporting the machines to Poland, just within the EU, because it was clear at the moment of transport that the final destination is a third country. This is the lesson from this topic, that even for some transport within the EU, you need the license for dual-use goods. So the next topic is, what can happen if I don't follow the rules? We have here 2 slides where we summarized and picked up few headers in the media that should demonstrate to you that this is not something you should ignore, because there are many cases in the European Union where companies were penalized. For example, on this slide, interesting topic for me, that one of the tractor producers sold parts of tractors and was penalized because these parts were on the list of dual-use goods, which he didn't know, sold it, and was heavily penalized. The penalties are quite high, because they should have educational and preventive effect. There could be also risk of criminal sanctions. So this is really important topic to have in mind. And I don't think even that the money penalties are the worst effect for you, because as our clients tell us, the worst negative effect for them is the reputation risk. Because you certainly don't want to be in the headlines of the media, the name of your company, saying that in some terrorist attack or in some war, they found explosives or weapons that were made of your product, that you sold them. And it's not only reputation risk for you. On the other slide, we also summarized some of the numbers of cases, how many entities are sanctioned and how many sanction cases were applied by the European Union. It is obvious from this topic that also the authorities are very sensitive about it, because it's their responsibility not to let any company, for example, in Czech Republic, to export any sensitive goods. And it would be also reputational risk for the Czech government if some Czech chemicals were used in some terrorist attack somewhere in the world. So that is the argumentation why the authorities are quite sensitive about it. And when we spoke with the local authorities, they told us that they really do have many cases and they really do apply high sanctions. So this is just a warning for you. Be careful about that. And here is the advice, what you should do to be safe and safer. We have 2 slides for that. On the first slide, what to do to be safe is the, let's say, first layer of measures that you should take to be safe. And the number 1 task you should do is review of tariff classification. As it was explained already today, tariff classification is very important for many things, among other also for the dual-use goods and military use goods, because these lists of military use goods and dual-use goods are defined, of course, based on the tariff classification. So you should make sure that the items in your portfolio are classified correctly, so that you can find them correctly in the list of dual-use goods. Also, the definition of commodity codes changes in time. So you should make sure that your tariff classification is up to date and correct. The second thing you should do is consult with your customers. It means in general you should be aware who are your customers, and you should be aware what they want to do with those goods. It means you should ask the clients what they will do with your goods or where they will sell them, whether your customers will use the goods to sell them abroad to some third country, because they can potentially sell them to restricted countries or unfriendly countries, and you should be aware of that. And the third action you should take, of course, review the legislation, the European legislation for the dual-use goods, and also your local legislation. And if you are not sure, consult with your authorities. So based on these measures, you should at least be aware whether you do have some dual-use goods or not, or if you are at risk that some of the goods in your portfolio could be dual-use or certainly are dual-use. And in that case, you should consult with your authorities whether you need some license. And after you go through these measures, you can even do more to be even safer. And the first advice that we have is, again, tariff classification. But to be safer, you don't do it just once. You should do it regularly, maybe once in a year, because not only the definition of commodity codes can change in time, but also your portfolio can change in time. So you should make sure that your tariff classification is always up to date in time. And the second topic, require declarations of end use from your customer. When we talk about this with our clients, they sometimes tell us, our clients will never tell us what they will do with our goods or where they will sell it. It's business confidential information they will never tell us. But you'd be surprised, many of them know about these obligations because in their countries they have similar obligations. They know that you have to comply with these obligations. And for some goods, you even need to have the declaration of your customer, because you need to imagine that the terrorists can very easily establish new empty company in the European Union, which is empty, has no history, is potentially not anyhow harmless. But it's up to the authorities to check whether the company is maybe financed by terrorists or owned by people who are on the sanction lists. And this is all information you cannot know, but you should know, or you should be able to bring maximum information to your local authorities. And for some products, it is even obligatory to provide the local authorities with the declaration of your customer about the end use of the product you are selling them. And the third advice we have is consult with your local authorities. I already explained that at least in the Czech Republic, the authorities are very well educated and helpful, but definitely you shouldn't take that for granted and use them as a consultancy agent. They don't like that. They don't like if you send them the whole portfolio of all of the items that you have. You should do, of course, the exercise yourself and consult with them only those cases which are not certain for you. But for these cases, they are definitely helpful. And I can only advise that because only those two practical examples which I mentioned, the trucks for the military in other European country and machines for car productions were surprising cases even for us. And the last advice we have, implement internal policies. Because as I said, your portfolio of items can change in time, but also your people in your team, the personnel can change in time, and you should have the internal policies, what everybody should do with the new product on your portfolio to make sure that you are safe and prevent any risks. So this is the end of my topic and all of my advice. If you have any questions, you can raise them in the chat here, or if you come up with the questions later on, no problem, you can send the questions to us and we will definitely come back to you. So if no questions at this moment, thank you for the attention and I give the word to the next presenter.
Thank you. I'm Florin Nagoe, Senior Manager within PwC Romania. specialized on customs and international trade. And the topic that I will cover today is related to centralized clearance for import. So this great new opportunity which economic operators have at their disposal for their import operations. I should start just by reminding you that one of the main goals of the European Commission was to harmonize the customs formalities related to import and export within the European Union. Because although we had the legislation quite harmonized, we saw in practice that different approaches were in various member states. So the first let's say, initiative that somehow partially achieved this goal, we should remember that was related to the central customs declaration at a local level, like in each member state, and also the single authorization for simplified procedure, the so-called SASP. We have this also in place in Romania. So we have seen some of our clients using the centralized customs declaration at the local level. In this example, we have highlighted a situation applicable in France when the supervising customs office was in Paris, whereas the presentation customs office was in Le Havre and Marseille. And when it came up about clearing the goods for import purposes using the SASP, unfortunately, this harmonization goal was partially achieved because we did not have like a centralized system, and therefore customs authorities had different views and different opinions. So getting ahead with centralized clearance for import purposes would mean, in a nutshell, that we can lodge our customs declaration at a supervising customs office. And I will take the example mentioned on the slide. Here we have a supervising customs office in Lithuania, while the goods will physically be presented at other customs offices located in other EU member states. And in my example, mentioned on the slide, the goods are presented at the presenting customs offices in Poland and Spain. So this is in a nutshell how it should work. But you must bear in mind that it does not work for every member states, because we have some early adopters that are using that are implemented CCI and are using CCI. So you can see on the slide that besides Romania, we have Bulgaria, Estonia, Spain, Luxembourg, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and recently joined Croatia and Italy. So these member states may use CCI within their territories. Now the key roles of the supervising and presentation customs office. So very simplistic speaking, the supervising customs office would be responsible for handling the submission of the customs declaration. And it will also be responsible for validating common and national data, then sending it to the presentation customs office for further validation. Then the controls, the physical controls, will be obviously performed by the presentation customs office, but the supervising customs office would have also roles in terms of performing also risk analysis. Then the final release of the goods would be done upon the decision of the supervising customs office. In more detail, because the supervising customs office and presentation customs offices are having multiple responsibilities, the supervising customs office will basically handle the customs duties in the currency applicable in the member state where the supervising customs office is located. Then, as I mentioned, it's about validation and acceptance of the customs declaration, as well as coordination and communication with the presentation customs office and namely the importer. And then obviously the final decision for the release of the goods. Then the interesting part is about the presentation customs office, because here we will present our goods. And although the harmonization in terms of customs duties will be achieved in the sense of presentation of paying the customs duties, when it comes up to other taxes like VAT and excise duties, we will talk about the very well-known relevant directives. So each member state would have its own national requirements, and therefore we can see different approaches here, and the challenge would be most related from my perspective to excise duties, because if we give an example about the movement of excise duties upon importation under excise duty suspension arrangements, we must then observe the national requirements of each member state to do it. So although from a customs perspective, we would achieve this harmonization, from a perspective of the national taxes like VAT and excise, we will face some challenges also in terms of paying the VAT corresponding to the each rate applicable in the member state where the goods are presented. Then the last thing here is about the fact that you must be aware that the CCI is applicable provided that the importer holds the AEOC status. So this is like a crucial condition for obtaining the AEO. And therefore, another thing will appear here related to the harmonization, because although we have the same rules related to AEO, we have seen in practice that different approaches may appear depending where the application for AEO is lodged. The purposes, functionality, and benefits of CCI for your business. And we have divided these in 4 big categories, which we will take it one by one. It's about centralization and efficiency. You do not need to deal with multiple customs offices. You basically have a single point of contact where you basically lodge all your customs declaration. So it's about having one process, one data set, and you are basically aligning with a single customs authority requirements, and you will maintain a standardized customs process across the EU. Then it's about cost saving, because as you may imagine, by placing the goods under this CCI procedure, the need for placing the goods under the transit procedure will not occur so often or at all. So you will not be no longer needed to have these transit customs procedures so often. Then it's about administrative efficiency, centralizing and reducing the administrative workload of managing the customs clearances in multiple countries, and having a single software interface where you will need to be connected to the customs system of the supervising only of the supervising customs offices. Then it's about enhanced compliance, improving oversight. Centralized clearance will provide you a better control over your customs compliance, reducing the risks of your errors and inconsistencies across the different jurisdictions. Also, it's about the flexibility and scalability, because despite centralizing your customs procedure, businesses can maintain their flexible logistic operations, managing goods which enter from different member states without needing to separate customs clearance processes. About the deployment of the CCI, as you may be aware, we have 2 phases. The first phase started as of 1st of July this year, I already mentioned about the early adopters, so the member states that started to implement this. We have discussed with Romanian customs authorities about, because Romania is one of the early adopters, and the feedback is, although Romania successfully adopted and deployed as of 1st of July the CCI is somehow linked to our national customs system, which is pending to be finalized. So although we have, Romania has successfully deployed and implemented the CCI, it's not yet fully operational because it must be linked with this national import system. But we are expecting in the near future to be already go live. So the customs declarations, the type of the customs declarations which are in scope of in the first phase are only the standard ones, and may also include the simplified supplementary declarations. So we are not talking about other types of declarations that will be possible to be used in 2025. Then we have just some customs procedures that are in the scope. Namely, we are talking about the release for free circulation, the warehousing, the customs warehousing, the inward processing, end use, and re-import. Then we have, in terms of goods, all the goods covered by the CCI in phase 1, excepting the excisable goods, which will be included in phase 2 in 2025. So phase 2 in 2025 in June will cover also these other aspects related to the topics such as simplified procedure of the entry into the declarant records, and also other type of goods such as excisable goods. We will also have the decentralized clearance for export purposes, but this is not somehow a different initiative. It's somehow related to the new AES system for export purposes that is already implemented by some member states. And somehow the CC for export purposes will be, let's say, integrated within AES. So we must have also, we must bear in mind also that we can use in the future the centralized clearance for our exports. Then just a few words about the requirements to get the CCI authorization. So as I said, it's crucial for benefiting from this facility to have the AEO for simplified customs procedures status, so the AEOC status. Without this status, we cannot use the CCI. And you may imagine that this would be only applicable to entities that are established in the customs territory of the Union. So we will remember that only companies that are established in the Union customs territory may apply for AEO and may use the CCI, because the mutual recognition agreements concluded with other territories, for example with Switzerland, is not mentioning about the AEO status when it comes up to benefits, but it's more on the safety and security aspects, so the AEO-S status. Then it's about your process, the readiness of your processes and your systems, because as you may imagine, you must design and redesign and reshape your flows and your logistic flows in such a way to achieve the benefits granted by this CCI. I will not get very much into details about AEO because this topic will be somehow addressed by my next colleague, but just want to end by letting you know a few words about the application and authorization of the use of the CCI. So besides the fact that it may take a lot of time, so in a best case scenario, we were talking about like 4 or 5 months if everything goes very, very well. If you can imagine, if you don't have already the AO status, you may this time frame may be significantly extended, because as you may know, the AO is also a lengthy process that is lasting a couple of months. So if you are thinking to apply for CCI, I think the best moment is to start analyzing your flows right now. Check if you have the AO status and apply for it, and afterwards apply for the CCI authorization as soon as possible, obviously in the member states that are today allowing this. Because it's also about the consultation procedure, as you may imagine, between the member states, because we have, as I mentioned, a supervising customs office that will have to communicate with the presentation customs offices. And these 120 days may be, so 4 months, 4 or 5 months, may be also extended due to this consultation procedure. Then afterwards, once the authorization is granted, you may benefit of this facility, but you must bear in mind that using this and monitoring this authorization is crucial, because you must also comply with the conditions further on, and also with the conditions related to the AO, because we come back again to the AO. If you are losing our AO status, we will basically lose also the possibility to clear the goods using our CCI authorization. So both of the concepts must be carefully complied with. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will pass the floor to the next presenter, to Vita.
Thank you, Florin. Good day, colleagues. So I'm pleased to have the opportunity to discuss the issue related to obtaining the authorization for the Ukrainian companies. PwC Ukraine was a pioneer in 2021 with IEO. To the date, we have implemented more than 25 projects for companies across various industries in Ukraine. Despite ongoing hostilities for Ukraine, we moved towards the European Union. A landmark date for Ukraine was in October 1st, 2022, when we became a 36th country which joined the NCTS Convention. This significantly changed the approach to completing customs formalities, opening up opportunities for business similar to those which is in EU countries. Prior to this, in August 2022, the customs visa-free law was adopted and extended to facilitate the path for obtaining the IO status, which allow for simplifications without initially obtaining the IO status. Today, the local customs legislation in Ukraine is gradually moving towards harmonization with European, through certain inconsistencies with authorization is still remain. The wave of authorization was simplification and obtaining the IO status began only last year. The main reason was the cancellation of the simplified import and export procedures without presenting the goods to the customs. Currently, there are 424 different authorizations. For example, local custom clearance is up to 200. Application for special seal is around 100. Comprehensive guarantees is around 17.6, and others authorization is up to 50. You can see on next slide the key changes what have occurred in Ukrainian legislation over the past 2 years. It's worth nothing that Ukraine mostly retains a highly regulated approach with obtaining authorization. Every step towards harmonization with European approach is challenging because any point changes require amendments of the custom code of Ukraine as a whole, which will be not possible at least for next few years, I think. The obtaining of authorization in Ukraine is possible only by fulfilling the criteria. You can see it, how it is correlated between different kinds of authorization. The maximum requirements continue to be for criteria and defines for IO status type C and type S authorization. The documents submitted to the customs include the same approach like in EU, the application for authorization and self-assessment questionnaire. But at the same time, all documents which company relies when they filling our self-assessment questionnaire will be requested, will be revised by the customs during the assessment process. The time frame within which customs make a decision is ranged from 150 to 180 days. A significant difference between simplifications in EU and in Ukraine is that in our case, we do not have simplification like Florent previously presented, a centralized clearance and entry to the declarant's records. The key features of authorization in Ukraine are shown on these slides. And it is worth adding that one of the advantages important for Ukrainian IOs, for Ukrainian companies, is a fast line at the border. It's not fully implemented due to the lack of necessary infrastructure and technical equipment at the tech points. As I mentioned earlier, the Ukrainian customs use a rather formalistic approach for assessment, but we expect that it may become more liberal after the signing first MRA with Ukraine and formation of sufficient number of authorization company. Previously on slide, you may see that the IO authorization, it's around 17 at this moment during the 4 years being in this program. It is also necessary to add, and the company stress on this, that even if the company has necessary authorization, it is not exempt from undergoing official controls like phytosanitary, veterinary control, which can only be performed with a physical presence of the goods at the customs terminals, as we do not have the capability to perform such controls at the border. On the next slide, you can see our key features, which I already mentioned. And as about the future change, important change, which is necessary for Ukraine, it concerns, first of all, the abolition of financial ratios for IO status. However, the question remains about the provision regarding confirmation of the adequacy of financial standing. We expect that bylaws will be updated and will be some flexible options will be proposed by the regulator at the nearest time. We know that in EU there are cases where company may have a negative net assets, and this is not a deal breaker for IO, but at the same time it is still deal breaker for Ukraine with negative assets. And it's only taken into account by custom authorities of European Union during the assessment, unlike our Ukrainian approach. Regarding next very necessary topic, it is customs audit and any self-checking compliance processes in Ukraine, as well as correct mistakes in customs declaration, leading to further refunds of overpaid custom duties. Ukraine legislation differs from the EU. In continuation, it is subjective nature, since the legislation does not provide any direct norm with acceptance in adjustment of customs declaration, changing the customs code and custom valuation. In other words, there is no mechanism for refunds in case the company identifies an incorrect classification code and valuation. There is no constant technical solution for providing import and export data information. At the same time, in the customs audit procedure, we are trying to move towards harmonization with European procedures, with informing the enterprise before the customs checkup. So we have this formal approach when customs previously inform about this, and considerations of the results of the customs checkup by the automatic risk management system during the custom clearance and for monitoring through the authorization. I will be happy to help in case you will have any customs issues or any questions building the business with Ukraine. So you can ask me directly for any help or ask any question directly in chat. And thank you for attention. And with pleasure, I give the floor to Marcin Majewski, PwC, Poland.
Yes, thank you so much, Vita. Hello, everyone. My name is Marcin Majewski. I'm a tax director in PwC Poland, and I'm handling, obviously, customs and trade issues. The topic which I'll be presenting today is around the origin of goods, and I have two very good news. I am the last speaker, but the very good news is also around the PEM Convention, that there are significant changes. And these changes, all of them, are very positive for companies. So about the origin of goods, why is that so important? In the previous sessions today, we have discussed about classification, how important it is. Another aspect was the customs valuation. That's also a mandatory, very important aspect. And the third of those three very important aspects is the origin of goods. We must always calculate, declare, and prove the origin of goods. All the goods in the international trade, they always must have origin. And now, as companies, we have choice of either choosing the standard, which is a must, standard non-preferential origin, or in certain cases, we can benefit from the special preferential origin of goods. And that preference usually means, for most of companies in practical perspective, this means lower duties, usually duty-free trade. So it's cheaper, it's very good. So what's good in the changes? It will be easier to use the rules of preferential trade within the pan-Euro-Mediterranean trade. Why is this specific change so important? There is only one free trade agreement that the European Union has signed with multiple countries. Usually the free trade agreements are individual. For instance, from Polish perspective, very important is the trade with the UK, with the United Kingdom, following Brexit. But that's individual agreement between EU and the UK. Pan-Euro-Mediterranean agreement, the PEM Convention, that's how we call it. PEM Convention is a multiple country agreement. And this agreement has not changed for the past around 10 years. And now we are where we are right now, what you see on the slide, the orange bullet. This is where we are right now. We are in the transitional period where with individual countries, we as companies located in the EU, with individual countries, we can trade either on the old rules, which we have had for the past 10 years, or with the new rules that will apply in the future to all the countries. We are in the transitional period. This period is coming to an end, finally, with the end of December. So as of 1st of January, there will be no longer two set of rules, the old rules and the new rules, etc. It will be not so complicated anymore. As of 1st of January, so in less than 2 months, all the countries which are parts of the PEM Convention will be trading with the new rules. That's way easier for all of us to apply. So 1st of January, coming soon. What's changing? And this slide is very important. All the changes, I presume, are positive. And I'll just read them out because that's, I believe, very important. So one is that we will have simplified documentation. For instance, the Euromed certificates are removed. So if you are importing into Romania, shipping out of Romania, out of Bulgaria, all of the EU countries, you will not be able to use EURMED. We will be using EUR1 as a simplification. What is more, it will be possible to use in the calculations where we try to calculate and then prove the preferential origin. In the past, we have had to use a very specific price of component that we have used in production, looking at when we have purchased the component or the resource and at what price. And that specific price and specific date we had to use. Now we will be able to use an average price, which is way easier to prove, way easier to calculate. So we can use average price of the component throughout a period of time. So that's easier. What's also important is that we will be able to use full cumulation, which means that we will be able to accumulate in our calculation of preferential origin the preference resulting from purchasing resources and components from various preferential countries. So for instance, if you have in your finished product, if you have components coming from various preferential countries, let's say you have some parts coming from Turkey, some parts coming from Lithuania, some parts coming from Germany, you assemble all of them and you ship out from Bulgaria to Morocco, well, it will be easier for you to accumulate all of this preference and prove that your finished product is preferential. Also, the tolerance is increasing. This will help a lot. And this is perhaps the first exercise you can do. Whenever in the past you had a finished product that you were willing to export, and that finished product was very close, but still not preferential, perhaps right now you should recalculate, revisit your calculations, because perhaps as of 1st of January, that finished product will become eligible for preferential trade, so duty-free trade. And that is because the threshold is changing from 10% to 15%. Later on, I will present a slide where perhaps the calculation will be more clear on this aspect. There is also an elimination of the duty drawback prohibition. Well, that's a big change. This means that we will be able to revisit when we have paid duties and when we should have paid duties. Perhaps duty refunds will be possible in certain cases. So that's worth to check. Also, the proof of origin, so the EUR1 certificate, for instance, the validity will be extended. It's not just 4 months as it was until now. It will be 10 months. So that means in certain cases where the documentation is late following the shipment, you will still be able to revisit, you will still be able to reduce your duties because you have more space in time. You have 10 months to claim that. And another flexibility is offered in the terms of transportation. So far, the PEM Convention was telling us that we must go directly with our goods from one country to another, for instance, from Italy to Israel. It had to go directly. Now this rule is changed to a more flexible approach, which means that you don't have to go directly from Italy to Israel or back. You can go through other third country as long as you can prove that the goods were not altered, not manipulated in that other countries, that they were, for instance, subject to customs authority supervision, they remained in a bonded warehouse or a port or any other area that is under control of the authorities. So the goods have not been changed. That's way easier to transport the goods and benefit from duty-free trade. And now a bit of a change, focus on an important judgment from the European Court of Justice. As we look at the ruling regarding the ADM Hamburg case, it says that when we are transporting the goods, we can still split that shipment or we can accumulate that shipment as long as we can prove that only preferential goods were subject to trade. We must remember about this whenever we transport and whenever anything happens during transportation, if we, for instance, split the shipment, that not only the articles mentioned on this slide, but also the court verdict supports that, yes, we can change the goods also during transportation, as long as we do not mix preferential goods with non-preferential goods, and we can prove that. So that's important. Please bear in mind that there is still space to be duty-free, also in terms of some specific cases of transportation. And now the practical perspective on calculations. This is a very, very simple table kind of showing something very, very simple finished product that had 5 components. So this is in practice what the new PEM convention will change. You see the orange line, the component number 4, its value, it's worth 11% of the value of the finished product. So as I said, it is changing from 10% to 15%. So in this case, the orange line in the past 10 or 12 years was declining you from having a duty-free trade, because this specific component has exactly the same tariff code as the finished product. The finished product tariff, as you can see on top in the dark orange color, is the same as component 4. And because it's 11%, that's over 10% threshold. Now this threshold is increasing to 15%, which means that even if you have a component from the same tariff code, you have 15% space to use it. So in this case, like I said, it's worth to revisit your previous calculations where there were goods that were not eligible for duty-free trade. Now it is very likely that more of your goods will be duty-free. So please revisit, double-check this calculation. As I mentioned, a lot of these changes are beneficial and making that easier. So that's a very good change in terms of PEM convention. But of course, please remember that the devil is in the details. So it's not all of it duty-free, not automatically, not everything. We still must do the calculations, check the articles carefully, do the calculation, consider all the evidence which you need regarding your components and resources, and gather the evidence that is needed for you and your trading party, so the buyer or the seller that you are trading with. And once again, coming back to PEM convention, please remember that there is one specific case, and we are mentioning this because we had more than one case of such experience from our client project. There is one specific country where it's not so easy, that not only we must remember what the PEM convention is saying and that we have transitional period and that 1st of January is the new set of rules, that is Israel. Trading with Israel is more specific because there are certain parts of Israel which do not fall within the PEM convention. And that is because of the complexity of the Israeli territory. And not all the locations and sites within Israel, not even within Jerusalem, are automatically falling into the PEM convention. So you may have goods or components supplied from various cities in Israel, various, we say here on the slide about zip code or postcode, maybe you call it, that there can be actually buildings that are not far away from each other, and you will buy component from one factory that will be preferential falling into the scope of PEM convention, or you may buy component from a factory located just a few hundred meters away, but it will have a different postcode, it will have a different location, and from that second factory, you will not benefit from preferential trade under PEM convention. So please remember about the specific case of Israel. And I think that's pretty much it about the changes. Please remember that the PEM convention is changing. This is crucial agreement for our trade with our closest neighbors around the Mediterranean Sea and not only. And this is a good opportunity. And this is also the moment to revisit things that perhaps you have not been recalculating for the past year, 1, 2, 3, 5 years, or more in some cases. This is the moment to revisit, try to find new savings, either in import or export of goods. It's really worth to try it now. And if you want to maximize your benefits, it's worth to do it now, November, December, to be ready for the 1st of January. Needless to say, you can reach out to any of us that you have seen our faces and names on this webinar, that in each country we can help you out with either this PEM convention or in general origin of goods, or, and now I'm heading towards wrapping up this webinar. Thank you so much for the participation. Thank you to all the guests. Thank you for being with us. Thank you to all the speakers who have participated. Thank you for preparation. There was a number of questions from our guests, whether this presentation will be shared. Yes, we have obviously recorded this webinar. We will be sharing the slides as well with our contacts. Please come back to us whenever you have any questions. And we will also answer the questions that our guests have typed in during the webinar. We will be coming back to you with those responses rather individually, because some of the questions are specifically per territory. We must include this into the perspective that we will be speaking. So each of us individually will be coming back to us. And as for today, thank you so much once again, and see you on our next webinar. Thank you.